Hi shitties, it's me, Eddie Stevens. I'm out here in the bosque, which is the forest that grows by the river here in New Mexico. Been running on a trail out here for over 15 years now, not non-stop obviously. And this behind me now is, believe it or not, the Rio Grande, or Rio Grande, which obviously means large river, but doesn't look very large, does it? Believe it or not, sometimes there's no water there, it dries up completely, so this isn't too bad. I'm feeling a bit self-conscious about the way I look right now. I don't think that this is good lighting for me, I've noticed as I do these videos, which is sad because it's literally daylight. I mean, it's what I'll look like during the day. I wouldn't normally care, but I did a show the other day. I do stand-up comedy. Killed it, had a great set, if I say so myself. And then a very drunk girl in the audience, talked to me, and the first thing she said was, you should use sunscreen. And I went, why'd you say that? You think do I have sun damage? She's like, a little bit. And it made me feel really bad, but then she did, literally 10 minutes later, want me to drive her back to her hotel. You know what for. She sold skincare products, and she was trying to make a fortune off me. No, but in the right lighting, I look fantastic, but this is not good. My hair looks really bad. If you want to see how good I can look, check out my TikTok. It's really for the gays, but even if you're straight, you can check it out. So while I was on my run today, I was thinking about England back row players, because this is the latest in my insanely popular. I get tens of people watching these videos. My insanely popular series of England top 10s or sometimes top 5s, depending. I realized as I was going that in positions where we only have one of that position, does that make sense? I'm not making any sense. So in individual positions like scrum half, fly half, hooker, where we just have one in each team, it's very hard to come up with an England top 10, mainly because there are only 10 teams in the Premiership now, and they're not all even English, so it gets really tricky. But in positions like centre, wing, and certainly back row, plenty of options. So I can easily do a top 10, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to name 3 back rows, 3 complete back rows in order, and then 1 extra back rower. Does that make sense? So yeah, I think this will be a lot of fun for me, and maybe for you. I suppose that'd be a bonus. And what I do with these top 10s / top 5s is I start at number 1. For reasons I've explained in other videos. It's not a traditional way of ranking, but I actually think it works better. And it's important to know that I'm not going to be giving any thought to development or who's, ones to look out for the future. Oh, up and coming talent. I'm not going to do any of that shit. It's literally who are the best right now. So I'll name a back row, 6, 7, and 8. Who I think are the best back row that England have available right now, and I will take into account form, talent, personal bias, and then I'll imagine that they've been forced to retire due to financial hardships after millions of pounds were taken from the men's game to devote to women's rugby, the future of rugby. I don't want to be up here. Where am I? So I thought about this a lot during my run. And interestingly, and actually this was a surprise to me, which is very surprising to me because I am me. So I'm surprised that I was surprised by my own selection, if that makes sense. I'll just say it. I was thinking about the starting back rowers from the last England match. And it was Tom Curry at 6, wasn't it? Sam Underhill at 7, Ben Earl at 8. But Chandler Cunningham South has been starting at 6 recently. And when I typically have a lot to complain about when it comes to England selections. There's very few areas where I agree with Borthwick's selections, although I'm often comfortable with them because there's a lot of good competition. I've actually surprised myself again because when I was running, possibly because of lack of blood to my brain, I thought that the last starting England back row was Cunningham South, Underhill and Ben Earl at 8. And that is the starting back 3 I would pick. But I forgot that Tom Curry inexplicably, regardless of his current form and injury status, got picked to start. I think a couple of matches, didn't he? Completely insane. Tom Curry right now, Tom Curry wouldn't be anywhere in my top 10 right now. He's been injured too many times. He doesn't look the same as he did before his long injury enforced sabbatical, and I couldn't even consider him. I think it's one of the most damning indictments of Steve Borthwick, and I'm not one of these people that want Steve Borthwick to be fired. I don't. But his decision to start Tom Curry, even ahead of his brother Ben Curry. I mean, if you've watched Sale this season, or even in Ben Curry's cameo off the bench for England, he's been by far the superior of the Curry twins. So it's bizarre to me. So anyway, that's my first choice back row for England is Cunningham South, Sam Underhill, and Ben Earl. Sam Underhill, I might sound like a bit of a hypocrite because he's constantly out injured, but what I've learned about Sam Underhill is you can always back him. You can never write him off. I don't care how long he's out for injury. You put him back in at 7 for England and he puts in a world-class performance. He is the real deal and there's just no getting around it. As long as he's fit and available, he has to start. He will always be our best 7 until he gradually will eventually decline, I suppose, or he finally gets that one knock too many and has to retire. But Sam Underhill at 7 for sure. Ben Earl, you just have to reward the form that he's shown for England. I mean, he's been excellent for Saracens for a long time. I remember when Eddie Jones was consistently picking players like Alex Coles at Saints ahead of Sam Underhill in England's back row. Completely insane. He had to wait a while, but once he got in an England shirt, you could never really drop him, and I'm certainly not going to. He has to be somewhere in there. Sam Underhill is unmovable at 7, so Ben Earl at 8 makes sense. And then, to be honest with you, so many players could start at 6 for England. But again, I think Cunningham South needs to be rewarded. I mean, it's the opposite of what Steve Borthwick does. Steve Borthwick thinks he has to be dropped to the bench for playing really well in a 6 shirt for England. I think he needs to be rewarded, and you keep that starting back row as it is. Now, as is often the case, naming your second string can sometimes be more fun than naming your starting players. You know, it's always fun coming up with an England A squad, or Saxon squad if you want to be cheeky. This back row that I'm going to name is arguably better than the one I just picked to start for England. Ow, I've got a fucking great thorn in my ankle. Hang on. I really need to stop doing these videos out here. I don't know why I've taken to doing it. Not only are they not very popular, but as I described in a previous video, all of the plants here in New Mexico are aggressive, spiky, poisonous, allergy-inducing cunts, and they're just constantly attacking me. Anyway, where was I? Yeah. This back row, my second choice back row, I'll be naming 3, remember, and then one more back rower, is arguably better than the one I just named. But as I said, you just have to reward the form that they've shown and the consistency of performances. But this back row, 6, 7, and 8, starting at 6, I picked Ted Hill for reasons that everybody understands. Big, shockingly, surprisingly mobile, fast player, line-out option, can even play second row, carries well, tackles well, does everything well, really, really needed to be given a chance, probably against Japan, but didn't happen. But regardless, I'd have him at 6. And by the way, I'm ignoring, you know, I forget the name of the law now, or the rule that England have with foreign-based players, and I'm picking Jack Willis. Now, you might be thinking, if you've got Jack Willis, if you're allowing Jack Willis to be picked, how could you not start him at 7? Again, it's between him and Sam Underhill. You could argue start him ahead of Cunningham South at 6, or, you know, switch Sam Underhill to 6 and have Willis at 7. But again, I'm rewarding the form that those starting three have shown. So it just makes sense to me, have him as next in line. So Ted Hill at 6, Jack Willis at 7. I don't need to explain why he would be at 7. And then at 8, a player who I don't think I can't think of a player who's been more celebrated and then sort of rejected collectively by England fans, and that's Zach Mercer. I feel like, a couple of seasons ago he was playing in France and everyone was losing their minds about how amazing he was, as is sort of the way. We did it with Stefan Armitage. We did do it with Zach Mercer, and maybe we're doing it now with Jack Willis. I don't know. We tend to get very excited when our back rowers go over to France and play well. But Zach Mercer, every time I see him play, I've lost my train of thought. I think what I was getting at is that everyone was going crazy about Zach Mercer, and then he came back to England, and people went, oh, maybe he's not that good after all. But he's playing for a Gloucester team that, are very hot and cold themselves. And every time I see him play, he looks phenomenal. And I'd just love to see him with world-class players all around him. That's a fucking delicious back row, isn't it? My third choice back row, also very exciting, but definitely more experimental. And maybe a bit, and would definitely be more of a gamble. I feel like the first 2 back rows I picked, either of those could start for England in any game, in any tournament, in any setting, and you would go, that's solid, they're going to do a good job. This one, you wouldn't be as confident of, but nevertheless, it's exciting. At 6, I picked Tom Pearson because he's another player who was sort of top of the pops for a while. Everyone was raving about him. And then he really had his England career. I feel like he had his England career severely derailed in that one match. Was it against Wales? I can't even remember who did it, but you remember there was a tackle. It was a very Matthew Tate, Gavin Henson on a Matthew Tate moment where he carried and got kind of picked up and dumped by I can't remember who it was. I'm sure you remember, since you fucking know everything. And he's never quite, it's not that he's never been the same, but we've never quite seen him in the same light. But he has put in some brilliant performances for Northampton, and he's still a bloody good player. And I don't see anyone else at 6 that I would want to pick ahead of him, except maybe Ben Curry. In fact, you know what? Even as I'm saying it, Ben Curry deserves that spot ahead of him. And then at 7, this is more... Well, before I get to 7, I'm going to say 8, because it'll make 7 make more sense. At 8, you're probably already thinking of him. You're probably annoyed that I haven't said him yet. You probably think he should have been picked ahead of Zach Mercer. But for me... Mercer's an extra special talent and has to be there. But Tom Willis, very close, could also start for England, and no one would complain, would we? Such an aggressive, powerful ball carrier. If he has any weakness, I don't know what it is. Maybe he's not quite as... I was going to say intelligent of a player, but that's not fair. But maybe he doesn't quite have, for example, the sort of silky skills of someone like Alex Dombrandt, who isn't on my list yet. Will he appear later? Probably not, but maybe. But again, you look at the pros and cons of a player like this, and his dynamic ball carrying and aggression is so high that he has to be there. So yes, we've got Ben Curry at 6, Tom Willis at 8. So who do I have at 7? Well, it's Will Evans. A player who I think will never, ever play for England, most likely. I'm going to go this way. I suspect he's never going to play for England, is he? He's probably considered too small. But I just think there is a place for... we say the more... we talk about, like, shorter... I don't know how tall he is. He's probably 6 foot. But, 6 foot and under is short nowadays for anyone in the back... anyone in the back row. But I think, and I was going to say, we think of the sort of traditional 7, but is it tradition anymore? It's been decades since we really had any kind of short, mobile, ball snaffling terrier like Neil Back sort of is the archetype, isn't he? It's been decades since we've had somebody like that, really. Trying to remember the last guy that was like that. It was probably, there was a South African guy, Andre Fourie, was it? And he was probably taller, bigger than 6 foot as well. But I'm babbling now. You know what I'm trying to say? I think there is a place still for a player like Will Evans. I say a player like Will Evans. Where the fuck am I? Look at this. What is happening? Oof, I'm back on the path. I should never have left it. But what was I saying? Yeah, Will Evans. There's really no one else like him in the Premiership now. I mean, the closest thing to him, no, there's nobody like him. He steals so much ball. He's such a nuisance at the breakdown. And obviously very mobile. He just has a massive engine on him. And I'd love to see him in an England shirt at 7 and see if, he's not going to be, galloping around ball in hand, running players over or anything. But what he does bring, I'd love to see if that is, ends up with a sort of net positive for England. Does that make sense? Yes, it does. Okay. So that's the last back row. I've named 3 of them. I need one more back rower to fill in to make up this 10. It's a sort of arbitrary number I've come up with. There are so many names coming to mind. Some of them I've already mentioned. There is Tom Curry. I've explained why I don't think he should be there. But then you've got Tom Pearson that I literally named and then erased and put, who did I put in? Somebody else instead of him. Ben Curry ahead of him. So sort of would make sense to have him as the 10th man. The 10th man. There's Alex Dombrandt I mentioned. I mean, how can he not be in contention? I mean, it's a bit tricky, isn't it? Because in my weird scenario in which we imagine that basically all of these other players are unavailable, it doesn't really make sense, does it? Well, yeah, it does. If all 9 of them are gone, you've got to start somewhere. Who would be the first name that would come to mind? Might be Alex Dombrandt. Let me think about this a bit more. As I said earlier, as I always say, I'm not picking players because I'm not picking young players just because they have potential. But there's a couple of young players who are genuine contenders. One is, of course, Henry Pollock from Saints, who looks like he's ready for international rugby right now. And the other one is Fisselau from Exeter Chiefs, who, when he was playing for the under-20s, I really thought was going to be forcing his way into an England team sooner rather than later. But the last few times I've seen him play, I haven't been that impressed. Having said that, my friends at Tribe Talking podcast did mention that Exeter Chiefs played against Gloucester, and they're adamant that Fisselau completely outplayed Zach Mercer, who is my second choice number 8. So maybe, but you know what? I'd probably go with Pollock. I think I would. I think if a player was injured from that last back row, he's versatile anyway. He can play 6, 7, or 8. And just the physically, he's definitely up to it. But more importantly, psychologically, he seems to be designed for Test match rugby. He seems to know. He doesn't just believe in himself. He knows he's good enough, and it's so important. He's very unlikely to get picked for England one day and underperform. So that's it. Those are my top 10 England back rowers. Tell me what you think about that. I'm going to go.